Welcome to the Attention Deficit Disorder Expert Podcast Series by Attitude Magazine.
Hey, welcome everybody. My name is Kirk Martin. I'm founder of Celebrate Calm, and I'm thrilled to be here on this webinar. I have a son who's 19 who was diagnosed with ADHD many years ago. I have it myself, and for many years I just tried to change his behavior, and because I didn't understand what was going on with him. And what we eventually did is team up with people like Dr. Daniel Amen of the Amen Clinic and Howard Glasser, great educational researcher. And we developed this Brain Boosters program to help kids with focus and attention and with behavior issues. It's in about 60,000 schools. And eventually, here's what ended up changing our lives. I called my wife one night and I said, honey, I've got this amazing idea. Why don't we take these really kind of challenging kids who are very misunderstood, and why don't we invite them into our home? And we'll teach them, we'll have these dinner camps. They'll come and eat dinner, and we'll teach them self-regulation, how to control their emotions. We'll tutor them so they can do homework in a more stress-free way. We'll teach them social skills. We'll teach them how to deal with their anxiety. And they'll come over on the weekends, and then in the summer, we'll just have intense kids in our home all summer long. It'll be great. And for whatever reason, my wife didn't like the idea at first, but she's got a big heart. And so over the course of a decade, we had about 1,500 kids with different issues. Some kids with ADD, ADHD, OCD, ODD, Asperger's, attachment disorders, autism, sensory issues, anxiety issues. So we had about 1,500 kids come through our home so that we could physically show them different ways to do homework. We could show and teach them how to control their emotions. And so that's kind of the backdrop for that. Today, my son and I travel together. I know many of you listening, we've met you out on the road. We've talked to about 300,000 parents. And so today we're going to answer your questions. And I know there is, if you're watching on the webinar, you'll probably see some slides up there. So let me give you kind of an overview of where we're coming from, and then we'll get into very specific answers to your questions. So one of our core principles is this. Before addressing your child's behavior, first control your own behavior and your own emotions. Because there's one core principle that we live, which is this. There's only one person in life that you can control, and that is you, yourself. But how many of us end up yelling at our kids and saying, you need to calm down right now? So we're going to talk about different ways to control ourselves because it's difficult. When you've got kids with ADHD or just behavior issues, it can be tough. Now, a lot of the kids that we work with, the kids, children with ADHD, they lack order inside. So it's critical to provide that structure and that consistency. We like to talk a lot about boundaries, clear expectations. We want to be very consistent with kids. We're big fans of having traditions in your home, things that you do that are always the same. Every Tuesday night is electronics-free night. So no electronics, we just play board games. Every Wednesday night we eat pancakes and have our pajamas on, whatever it is that you want it to be. So we'll talk about parents being emotionally consistent and controlling ourselves. It isn't enough just to tell children with ADHD to calm down or use your words. We must actively teach and show our kids how. How do you control your emotions when you're really upset because you want to throw things or hit or kick or spit or bite? What can we do? We'll get into that. A lot of our kids feel like they're failures, or they'll verbalize, I'm stupid, or they'll even say, you're stupid. And a lot of times they're doing this out of frustration. And what they're really crying out for is this. They want tools. What they're really saying is, Mom, Dad, I don't wake up every morning thinking of 5 different ways to lose all of my privileges. What I need are specific concrete tools so that I can improve my impulse control so that I can be successful. So we'll talk about giving kids tools. When kids with ADHD are upset or anxious, talking it through isn't sufficient. We must give them specific actions to take. We tend to over-talk things with our kids, and we'll talk about this principle of movement, and motion changes emotion. So that's kind of an overview, and now we'll get into specifics.
Hi, everybody. It's Susan from Attitude Magazine. When Kirk's ready, we'll be sending questions his way that many of you have submitted.
I am ready to go.
Okay. So we have a question here from someone about the morning hours. Difficult for everyone. She says specifically that she's trying to make her 12-year-old son responsible for waking himself up, and she just isn't succeeding. He sets 2 alarms. One's on buzz, and Jake's supposed to wake him up to put on his patch, and then snooze, and then another one. But he just turns them off and goes back to sleep. And she's just sort of can't figure out what to do. She's tried making his bedtime earlier. She's tried taking away things at night, tried to get him to bed earlier, but just no success. And she feels that he's assuming that she'll make sure he gets to school on time in order to avoid responsibility. So what do you think?
Okay.
Morning.
Great question. I'm going to address this both for younger kids, and then I'll get to kind of the 12-year-old and older. So couple principles for morning routine. 1, control yourself in the morning, because if you march into your child's bedroom, you got to get up. Come on, school. Let's get dressed. Come on. All of that anxiety that you have will cause your kids to do the opposite. They're going to run away from you because they wake up. It's 6:14 in the morning, and here's what they hear. Mom is already in kind of that anxious, crazy mom mode, or dad has begun with his whole lecturing. You know what? When I was a kid, I was up at 4:30 in the morning chopping wood. And it's just counterproductive. So a couple things I like to do with kids when I wake them up in the morning. 1, walk into the bedroom, sit on the side of the bed. I like sitting because it communicates a couple things. 1, I'm in control. Everything's okay. I'm not going to freak out. I'm not in anxious mode. I like waking my kids up with a compliment. Most of us have forgotten to do that. And so if you're on the line now, you've got almost 24 hours to actually think of a compliment for your child. But tomorrow morning, seriously, wake them up, compliment them on something they did the night before. Hey, Jacob, you know what was really cool? Remember last night after dinner when you brought your fork back from the table to the sink? Maybe next week you'll bring the spoon, and another month you'll bring all of your dishes back from the table to the sink. Now, you know what I'm saying. It's kind of facetious, but praise for progress, not perfection. Another really good tool to use in the morning is this. Ask your kids about something that's interesting to them, because we tend to wake our kids up with, come on, guys, get up for school, get ready, get dressed, eat, brush your teeth, and do all of these things that, quite honestly, they don't really want to do right now. And some of your kids just don't even like school. It's just difficult for them. So I may wake my kids up saying, hey, guys, here's the thing. Here's the deal. If you get up and get dressed and come downstairs and help me with breakfast, I would love to listen to you or hear about that next Star Wars movie that's coming out, or the new Lego project that you're working on. Whatever it is, maybe ask about their video games, even though you hate them, because that draws them in. Now, for younger kids, I like to get younger kids moving. Part of the difficult part is getting their brain awake, because many of your kids don't go to sleep on time. They don't sleep very soundly, so they're tired in the morning. I want that brain moving. Most kids love treasure hunts. So one of my favorite tools is to wake your kids up and say, guys, here's what I did. I hid your favorite Lego fire engine in the backyard. Bet you can't find it before breakfast is ready. Kids love treasure hunts. You don't have to do it in the backyard. You can do it in the basement. I prefer to get kids outside in the morning because fresh air changes moods. I don't care if there's snow on the ground. Your kids will go out. They don't wear jackets anyway, right? So get them outside. Get them looking, and here's what is going to happen. They'll find it, and they'll come in and say, Mom, we found our fire engine. And so you get to start the day praising them, saying, you guys are so good at finding your fire engine. Tomorrow, I'm going to have to hide it in a more difficult place. Now, here's what's going to happen. They're going to say, Mom, tomorrow, can we hide something and you have to find it? And all good moms will say, nope. But here's your leverage, and this is one of my favorite tools for morning routine for kids of all ages. Let's say that the school bus comes or carpool leaves at 7:16 a.m. I may say this, and you can adjust the times. Kids, here's how it's going to work. I'm going to get up in the morning, get ready. I will be completely ready. All of my stuff will be done by 7:03 a.m. If you are up, if all of your things are ready, backpack is by the door, shoes are on, if you are ready by 7:03 a.m., we will have 13 minutes. It could be 7 minutes, 4 minutes, whatever. Just allow a little bit of extra time. We will have 13 minutes to do whatever you want. If you want to play a board game, I'll play a board game with you. If you want to play the Wii for 7 minutes, I'll do that. If you want to play catch with a ball. Listen, if you want to show me one of those YouTube videos that you love more than anything in the world and that I really don't like more than anything in the world, I'll watch those YouTube videos with you. Just be ready on time. And here's the principle. I like to lead kids. I like to draw kids into a connection with me. So rather than forcing and yelling, guys, get up for school, you have to be ready in the next 30 minutes. Instead of yelling and forcing, I draw them into some time with me. I've also created a buffer zone because if they're not ready by 7:03 but they're 8 minutes late, it's 7:11, which is still 5 minutes early. I like that approach a lot. I like drawing them in. Now, here's the thing for older kids, and I do like that one for older kids. Older kids often won't get up in order to spend time with mom and dad, especially teenagers. I would encourage you to ask a teacher or an assistant principal at school to give your child a job to do in the morning. So be able to tell your son, your 12-year-old son, hey, Jacob, listen, I could really use your help. I need you at school on time every morning, or I need you here a few minutes early. When you get to school, could you help me with X? If you have a child who's kind of dramatic, maybe your child does the school announcements in the morning at school, so he has to be there a little bit early. Maybe he raises the flagpole, a flag at school in the morning. I've had bus drivers give kids jobs to do. Hey, I need you on the bus because I have to keep track of all the kids who get on and off the bus. I'm going to give you a notepad. When you get on the bus, I need your help. Because oftentimes your kids will be accountable to other adults, just not to you. So those are a few small things. But start with the principles of giving your kids very specific, concrete things to focus on. And if there are any questions later we can deal with, what do you do when your kids aren't on time?
Okay. That's super helpful. Here, I have a series of questions here from people who are saying that their kid just presses their buttons and they're wondering, how to keep calm themselves. So here's some examples. Can you offer suggestions on how to discipline and stay calm without hurting my son's self-esteem? I tend to blow up and get angry, which I know makes him feel worse about himself. Another person is, my son is at times rude, disrespectful, violent, loud, obnoxious, bullying, mean, and I feel those actions need to be addressed, but it's very difficult to do so and remain calm at the same time. I need techniques. So those are just two examples of similar questions from.
Thank you for starting with the easy ones. So here are a couple.
Not easy, not hard.
No, there's a couple principles, and we'll deal with them a little bit, some of them separately. So a couple things on pushing buttons. And you may not like this, and that's okay. You don't have to agree with what I say. Part of the reason I believe that kids can push our buttons is because we have so many buttons to push. And so a big part of what we teach in our curriculum is self-care, taking care of yourself first, so that when your kids do have emotional issues or when they are defiant, you can respond in a calm, even, matter-of-fact manner. So a couple self-care things for moms and dads. What does calm you down? What is nourishing to you? What can you do for yourself during the day that feeds you, that makes you feel more settled? Whatever it is, I encourage you to make that a priority. It is a gift to your kids. Because when you get that walk-in, when you exercise, when you do yoga, if your faith is important, reading scripture or going to a Bible study, whatever it is that's important to you, when you do that and your kids come and they start melting down or being defiant, then you can respond to them instead of just reacting to them. So here's a couple things I would encourage you to do as well. Write down, what are your buttons? What are your triggers? What just irritates you more than anything else that your kids do? I would write those down. Start with the top three, and you'll say, when my son does X, it really frustrates me. When my daughter does Y, and here's what I encourage you to think about. Next time your kids do that, what are you going to do differently? Because, see, I can't always control the child's behavior, but I can always control mine. And when I lead from a place of calm authority, it helps so much. So here are a few calming tools, say, in the moment that I would take. And let's say that, let's say my son comes at me. This is an example from when he was, 11 or 12 years of age. Say Casey comes at me, that's my son's name, and he starts in with that tone. And you know what that tone is. You have every right to say, young man, young lady, you go to your room for the rest of the night. You will not talk to me that way. And I'm okay with that. You can do that. But here's what I would prefer. And let's assume in this case that we're dealing with a child who's very emotional and they're upset. And Susan, after this, if you bring me back to just defiance, rolling the eyes, okay, that kind of thing. But let me deal with an emotional issue here. Here's what I would suggest doing. One, when kids get upset, I tend to sit down. I just like to sit because sitting changes the entire dynamic. It's very difficult for me to yell and scream when I'm sitting down, especially when my legs are crossed. And I'm also leading the kids to kind of a different, even to a different posture, because otherwise you're going to stand with your hands on your hips, staring down your 12-year-old daughter, and that never ends well. It always just escalates. I'm the adult. I want to lead kids to a calm place. So I sit down. I always use a calm, matter-of-fact tone, just like this, because when kids are upset, they're emotionally on fire. And if you add your emotion to their emotion, it gets combustible, and that's why the mom who wrote and said, man, I end up saying just horrible things to my child, and I feel guilty. That's really common. So I sit down, I use a calm, even matter-of-fact tone. Now, here's one of our big tools that we use for kids when they're upset, and here's the principle. When kids are upset, they're emotionally on fire. I want to put out that emotional fire. And the phrase that we use is very simple because I like simple. Motion changes emotion. Motion or movement changes emotion. And I'm going to run through examples for teenagers down on to toddler age. So the 12-year-old, my son, I want to get some movement. So this is a real-life example. He's coming at me, and instead of just yelling at him and sending him to his room, which I have every right to, I say, Casey, hey, here's the deal. When I hear that tone in your voice, it usually tells me you're anxious about something. You're frustrated about something that happened at school. Big principle here. Instead of just labeling the child, you are being so defiant, you are being so disrespectful right now, I try to get to the root of the issue. Because if your child is just, forgive me for this, I'm just honest with it, if your child is just a disrespectful little snot, you can't fix that. But if your child is acting in a defiant way because he's upset, because he's anxious, because he's frustrated, oh, well, I can fix that because I can get to the root of it. So I, as the adult, I like to say, Casey, you know what, this whole tone, not working for me. Listen, you can keep it up if you want, but all that's going to happen is you're going to lose all your privileges. You're not going to like it. But when I hear that tone in your voice, it tells me you're anxious. I'd like to help you out with that. So if you want to go grab some chips, I'll grab some salsa. I'll meet you in the kitchen. I'll meet you out on the deck, and we can talk about it. I like getting the child to do something specific and concrete. You go grab some chips. I like doing something specific. And to be quite honest, we've done this for 10 years now. This is our code word in our home, chips and salsa. Whenever we say that, that means, uh-oh, we better calm down. And to be honest, I like changing the dynamic. And Susan, you know this. If I say, hey, you want to go get some chips and salsa, you think, oh, Friday night, we're relaxed. It changes the dynamic. And now my child's sitting, I'm sitting, and we're eating while we're discussing the issue, not his attitude.
Right.
Here, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Let me do one more for your teenage daughters, and then we'll do younger kids, because older kids we can be rational. Yeah. Favorite thing for teenage girls, because moms, I guarantee if you just put your hands on the hips and just say, young lady, you will not talk to me like that, you're just going to have a big fight. So my code word with daughters is popcorn, and that means here's what we do. Our tradition is she goes in, you pop the popcorn for 2 minutes, and when you come out in the living room, sit together, not facing each other, next to each other, because now you don't want to look at your daughter when she's upset, because you're going to see her annoying little facial expressions, and she's going to see you rolling your eyes at her. So now you're eating popcorn together. You're sitting on the sofa together. For younger kids, here's the big key. I want to give kids physical actions to take. So your child's freaking out, and this can be on the floor at home. It can be in Target in aisle 3. Let me give you a couple examples. You can say, Jacob, listen, here's the deal. Do me a favor right now. And notice the calm, even, matter-of-fact tone. Do me a favor right now. Go in the living room. Put your Legos on the floor. When I come in, I'll build a little spaceship with you in 23 seconds. I give him some concrete physical things to do with that anger, because otherwise, here's what's happening. The child is upset, and he's frustrated, and he's disappointed, and he's going to hit or kick or spit or throw things or scream. And just saying, calm down, use your words, honey, doesn't work, because when kids are upset, they can't use their words. The part of the brain responsible for language doesn't work. So you have to give them something physical to do. Another great option is coloring. And I've used this with at least 400 or 500 kids in my home, whether they're 4 or 14. Grab some crayons, a marker, a pencil, and sit and start coloring while your child is freaking out and upset. Hold up another crayon. Don't look them in the eyes. Just say, hey, honey, you want to come color this, because I'm doing this Dora the Explorer here, or whatever age group, and color or draw with them. Now you're leading them to a calm place. The adult is sitting and coloring, which is very therapeutic for me as an adult, and now the child is coloring. And then the final example is to give your kids something physical to do, and I love doing this with dads, but moms, you can do this too. Picture this. Aisle 3 at Walmart. Child's on the floor, freaking out. Dad hits the ground, gets down on the ground, and does 5 push-ups. I guarantee you that child will stop freaking out on the ground, and he's going to look over and think, what is my mom or dad doing push-ups on the floor? I get to look over as the dad or mom and say, listen, Jacob, you want to do 5 with me? Because I can tell you need to do something. And you're giving him a physical activity to do when he's frustrated, rather than hitting or biting or screaming or any of those outward reactions. I let him do his push-ups. It can be jumping on a mini trampoline, doing a funny dance, a silly dance, some kind of physical activity, because after you've done the coloring, the popcorn, the push-ups, now you have an adult and a child they're both calm in an irrational place. Now you can get the consequences. Now you can get to the real meat of it, which is this. Teaching and showing your child this. Next time you get upset, what do you want to do differently? What do you want me to do? And I'd end by saying this. I'd encourage you to physically practice doing different physical activities every time your child gets upset, and to be quite honest, every time you get upset, because now you're modeling how to calm down. So when your kids come in the living room and they see, why is mom sitting and coloring? Why is dad doing push-ups on the floor? You can look over and say, because I've had a really frustrating day, and rather than scream at you guys or lecture you guys all day or come in and nag everybody, instead, I'm going to color, I'm going to do my push-ups. You want to help me out with this? You just modeled for them. So if you want, Susan, we can get to defiance later, okay, or even now. So
to what, Kirk?
To just outright defiance.
Okay, here. Let me give you an example of a question, because it's interesting.
Okay.
It's not either. I guess it's outright defiance. I'm not sure. It's not the emotional part so much as here it is. My 13-year-old son insists on arguing about absolutely everything: when to do homework, what to eat for dinner, what words are appropriate, what shows to watch. If I say black, he says white. He's rude, calls me stupid, doesn't respect our house, and treats his little brothers poorly. He causes turmoil every night. I've read that I should ignore name-calling and foul language because he's doing it to get attention, but then he thinks I don't care. I don't want to continue fighting, but I don't want to stop parenting either. So help.
Okay.
Good question about, how do you respond to negative behavior without appearing to reward it by the attention that you give it?
Okay. This is a good question. So I'm going to do it in three parts. This is a little different because it sounds like there's some anger there.
Yeah. Although mostly just disrespect, it sounds like, to some degree. Yeah.
Yeah, just a lot of disrespect. So a couple things. One, I would, if I were talking to you in person, Mom, I'd ask, and just make sure that Dad is not modeling this in the home, because oftentimes if hubby talks to the wife disrespectfully, kids pick up on that, and the pattern won't change until it stops, when Dad stops doing that as well. So just make sure that's not an option, and I talk to your husband and say, listen, can't talk to me like that because the kids are picking up on it. Now nobody respects me. So that's one thing. A couple things for this. I would not ignore it. I don't ignore anything. Being calm doesn't mean we ignore it. It just means I don't react emotionally and intensify the situation. But I want to handle this head on. So I'll give you kind of two parts to this. One is short term, what you do in the moment, and then the other one is long term. I want to get your son out of this whole mode of thinking. So 12, 14, 16-year-old boy or girl, here's how I'm going to respond to them when they roll their eyes, when they talk back, when they do those things. And see if this language makes sense. I'll use the name Jacob. Listen, Jacob, you're right. I'm not the boss of you. You're the boss of you, which means you need to be responsible for yourself. It's not my job to control you. But here's what I know about you. You're a 12, 14, 16-year-old boy. You're going to want a lot of freedom. You're going to want freedom to go on sleepovers, to go away with your friends. You're going to want to go to the mall without me following you. You're going to want to get your driver's license and go to school dances and football games. And I want you to have that freedom. But here's what I see happening in this home. Every time you roll your eyes at me and you talk to me disrespectfully, that doesn't affect me. See, here's the truth. I don't need you to respect me. I don't need you to respect me because I respect myself. I don't need you to respect me. The fact is, you need to respect me because it's good for you. Now, I know that's a little different than maybe what you've been taught, and I want to take it out of this. How dare you talk to me after all I do for you? I've been such a good mother to you. None of that drama. Don't do any of that drama. I don't need the child to validate me. I do not need him to behave well in order to validate my job as a parent. My job as a parent is dependent on what I do and how I act, not the child. And it's very important to set this, because if your job as a parent and your grade, so to speak, as a parent is dependent on what your child does, then your child will be completely in control of you. So watch the language again. I don't need you to respect me because I respect myself. Jacob, you need to respect me for your own good, because here's what happens. Every time that you roll your eyes, every time you don't listen to me, every time you come home late, it just notches something up in my brain that tells me, he's not mature enough to handle that freedom. He's just not ready because he doesn't have control of himself. So Jacob, this doesn't affect me. It affects you. You can continue to treat me that way if you want, but here are the consequences. You will not have any freedom. You will not get to go and have those special privileges. Your video game time will be severely limited. See, you have choices to make, Jacob, and watch the language here. I'm not guilt-tripping him. I'm not making it all about me and after all I've done for him, because that's not what the issue is. Jacob, you have very clear choices. You have a chip on your shoulder, and you can go one of two ways with that. You can continue to talk to me like that, in which case it's just not going to end well, because I'm the parent. I have the keys to the home. I have the keys to the cars. But what I'd encourage you to do is take 24 hours and come back to me and let me know, talk to me in an adult manner, in an adult tone, and why don't you and I problem solve and come up with some different ways to interact, because the way that's happening right now, not going to work. I would encourage you to train and teach your kids how to speak up, but speak up respectfully. And I'll give you one quick example I did with my son. When he got to be in his teenage years, he had a curfew of 9 o'clock. And naturally, he came to me and said, I don't like your curfew. I think it's too early. And I said, well, I'm proud of you, Casey, because you're a teenager. You shouldn't like my curfew. I expect you to want to push the limits, but I'm the adult, and I get to set the curfew. It's 9 o'clock. Now, if you want to talk to me like an adult and show me that you can control yourself and that you can earn a later curfew, I'm very open to that. So here's what happened. Casey went away, and he didn't say anything. He just started coming home early. He'd come home, and I noticed he'd come home at 8:52, 8:57, 8:41, different times. And after a few times, I said, Casey, what's up with this? You're coming home before your curfew instead of coming home 3 minutes late and making an excuse, or 14 minutes late and blaming it on your friends. I said, what's up with that? And here's what my son said. Dad, I wanted to prove to you that I can control myself and you can trust me so that you'll make my curfew later. And I said, you are either the most manipulative kid in the world or you have really good self-control, and I want to honor that. So I made it 9:15. And, of course, he said, you know what, I really thought that I earned 9:30. And I said, well, we can work toward that. But I'd encourage, that's the first part of this. The second part of this for this particular mom is this. There's something inside of your son that's just there's anger and frustration in there. He's wanting to control everything. And I don't want to give kids control of my home because they're not equipped to handle it. I want to give them some ownership, though. And that's where with Casey saying, hey, I control things. I'm in control. It's my home. 9 o'clock is curfew. But if you want some ownership of this, by changing your own behavior rather than me making you behave, you can have some ownership, and we can end up working on this. So I'd encourage you to have that talk, but don't react. Don't react to his rolling his eyes. Don't get drawn into an argument. Sit down and state very clearly the way it's going to work, and then put it in his court and say, Jacob, you have a choice in how you respond. I just want you to know there's positive and negative consequences. And I hope that makes sense.
That's really helpful. It's similar, a milder version of the same, but this is a person whose son sounds incredibly annoying. He says, what do I do with a 10-year-old who just can't stop pestering? He pesters me for things he knows I can't or won't buy. He pesters to buy things like an iPhone. He pesters to break house rules like TV before homework. The list goes on and on. It's a daily problem. She says, I say that I hear him and I understand him, but I won't do it. I never cave into these requests, but he just keeps pestering and pestering and pestering. And I'm beginning to feel abused because he repeatedly seems not to hear my answer. Days, weeks, and months of pestering over the same items.
Excellent question, and kudos to Mom for being consistent.
Really? Impressive.
And for not sending him away to boarding school yet. So good patience there, Mom. So a couple things. Part of this is that constant pestering, if you think about it. Some of it is a child who feels like he doesn't have control of himself or his schedule or his life, which a lot of our kids feel these days, because if you think about it, a lot of the kids that we're talking about here have these very busy brains, right? Their brains are just going 100 miles a minute, and they're kind of scattered. They're all over this place with ideas. They're disorganized. They're forgetful, executive function issues. So a lot of these kids don't feel like they have control of themselves. Think about this as well. And Susan and I were actually talking about this before the webinar. When we were kids, because Susan and I, although we're 29, we were from a different era, but we had a lot of ownership of our life. Like, we were gone all afternoon. So a lot of kids who don't feel like they have any ownership or control over their lives will try to control their parents. Brothers and sisters, they love to control because usually they're smaller than them. Many of your kids like to carry little things around in their pockets, little acorns and stones, because they can control them. So for this child, here's a couple things I'll do. I would suggest, and I like the soft approach, the kind approach, but then I like the tough approach as well. So one thing I would look at for this mom is giving him ownership. And when he's pestering, I always sit down And here would be my words that I would use and say, Jacob, here's the deal. I get it. You want it. And you've asked me 15 times for it. Not happening. You know I'm consistent. But here are some things that you could do in order to get what you want. So let's say he's saying, like, will you take me to Best Buy? I need to go to Best Buy. I need to get the new video game. Come on, can we go? Can we go? Can we go? I'd sit down, because I just love sitting, and say this. Listen, you can ask me 1,000,000 times. You can ask me 400,000 times. But I have 2 rules in my home. And the first one is this. The first one is we do everything with excellence. So if you're going to pester me with excellence. Go ahead. If you want to have a tantrum, do it with excellence. Because my second rule is this. You will never, ever, 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 ever get what you want by pestering me. It will never work. It hasn't worked in the past. It's not going to work now. And that's kind of what you've done, and I love that you're doing that, Mom. That's awesome. Just let them know it's never going to work. But here's where I transition. I get out of my chair, and I say, but, Jacob, listen, if you want to go to Best Buy and get that video game, I bet if you come in the kitchen and help me with dinner or go help me walk the dogs, we could come up with 5 different action steps you could take to earn some money to buy that video game. We could come up with some different ways to get to Best Buy early. So you could walk dogs in the neighborhood. You could make duct tape wallets. You could babysit. You could let's come up with some different jobs. I've got chores to do. I've got things all over the house, and I bet that the neighbors have some things. If you earn some money, then we can talk about a time to go to Best Buy. It could be Saturday morning after you actually clean your bedroom. Then we'd have time. But see, now I'm giving him a vision of how he can own this and how he can actually have some resolution. I love saying no to kids. I do. I think it's part of teaching them impulse control. No, 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 no. I'm great with that. But when I say no, I always like to say yes to something. No, not happening now. Not going to happen. But if you help me with X, Y, and Z, I bet we could problem solve. Now, here's the part where I might be a little bit more tough with him and turn it around on him. One of the things we taught all 1,500 kids who came in our home was this. We called it the opposites rule, because I like code words. I like simple things. So when the kids were pestering me, I would say this. Hey, opposites, opposites. And here's what opposites meant. Opposites meant that every time I use that word, it means every time you ask me for something, it's one more day, one more week until you actually get it. So I'm doing the opposite of what you want. You're not going to get what you want, and the more you ask, the more of a delay until you get it. So if you ask me 10 more times for that, that's 10 more days or 10 more weeks until we can get it. And the kids began, your kids are very smart, they began to manipulate the system, which I loved, and they'd say, hey, Mr. Kirk, I really don't want to go to Best Buy today to get that video game. Opposites. And so I taught them self-control through this, but I would use that with him. And here's the other tough one that I would use. For those of you who believe in the golden rule, I use this a lot with siblings, but I use it in this situation. Say this. Listen, Jacob, you're coming to me 15 times with the same thing, and I love, Mom, that you recognize that there's a little bit of a boundary issue or a respect issue there. And I'd say this. The golden rule says to treat other people the way you want to be treated. So what you're telling me, son, by pestering me every time you want something is that's the way you want to be treated. So from now on, when I want something done or I want something from you, I'm just going to ask you 15 times. And I know this will sound like vengeance, but it's not. It's just helping him see what it feels like. Mom, I would just start pestering him in the same way. Hey, did you get your homework done? Are you done with your homework? Did you bring the paper home? Did you get your chores done? Did you get it done? Did you get it done? And turn it around on him, not in a mean way. You're not calling him names. You're letting him actually feel what it feels like until he says, Mom, enough, opposites. And you say, okay, now that we've established some boundaries here and that we respect each other, let's give each other some ownership of this. But that's the way that I would go with it. But you don't have to yell with it. Just do the opposites and turn it around on him a few times until he kind of gets it, that that's not going to get what he wants. I think the big part of this is he wants some ownership and to feel like he has some control of the situation. So give them a little bit of ownership.
That seems like, giving some kids some control seems like a good theme that something you're stressing that makes a lot of sense. I wonder if we could switch over to talking about after school. I have probably 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 questions about homework, about structuring the afternoon hours after school when kids are come home or tired,
Okay.
Out of sorts, parents who feel like they have to be the homework police, and others who feel that whose kids are very oppositional and argumentative, especially older kids, in terms of doing their homework, being responsible for it. So there's a big set of issues here around homework. Yeah.
Okay.
At all ages, mind you. Yeah.
Okay. I'll try to get to many different ages here. So a couple things after school. You all know, moms, dads, you know your kids best. So some of your kids, when they get home, just need some downtime. Some of them need to run around a little bit. Some of your kids, you just jump into homework. Some people don't. You know the best. But here are a couple things I would encourage you after school. Let your first question after school not be, hey, how was school today? Do you have any homework? Because for many of your kids, quite honestly, school's just difficult for them. They struggle all day long, and the last thing they want to talk about is their struggles at school. So a couple things, talk about something they're interested in. Maybe that book that they really enjoy that they're into. It could be their Legos. If you're a stay-at-home mom or dad, when they get home, be sitting on the floor with some Legos. Draw them into an activity they enjoy. Do the treasure hunt after school. You may do this for older kids. I love this. Tell them if you pick them up after school or they come home, say, hey, you know what, I wanted to get your opinion on something. Because something happened with me at work today or at the office or when I was out and about, and I wanted to get your opinion on it. It's a really cool tool because now you're not grilling your child about their day and their homework. You're asking for their opinion about something that happened to you. It's just a great conversation starter. Okay, homework issues. I'll get to some different tools to use, but here are some overall principles that I like to use. Again, these are gray areas and only my opinion. For kids who are 5, 6, and 7, I think you have every right to go and talk to the teacher and say, listen, we're not doing homework. We're not doing any, or we're doing 15 minutes, or we're doing 30. I'm not a big fan of homework for little kids. There's no good research that says that cramming a lot of homework down a little kid's throat helps them succeed in life. There's no research on that. I would rather have your little kids spend time learning by doing things, playing with bugs, exploring, doing science experiments they're interested in, reading books they want to read that are interesting to them, doing all kinds of projects, doing service projects, playing, exploring, getting dirty, playing in mud, doing those things. So you are the parent. You have the right to tell the teacher, say, I love that you're so interested in my child's education, and I love that you care about them and you're sending this homework, but I just want to let you know we're doing 30 minutes a night, and then that's it. And after that, we're learning, but we're learning by playing board games and all kinds of other things. And I'm okay even if you mark his grades down. Now, for some of you, that's going to be tough, but I'm okay with that even as your kid's getting into elementary school. You have the right to put a time limit on. Personally, I didn't want to spend every night doing a lot of busy work just to get it done, just to please the system, when it wasn't really helping my kids learn valuable long-term skills. You have to make that call. Use your best judgment. But I would let my kids know this is what is important to me to us as a family. School and homework are important, but they're not the only parts of your education. Extracurricular activities, doing taekwondo, playing with kids in the neighborhood, doing service projects, going and visiting that elderly lady down the street. Those are all important parts of your education as a child, and we value all parts, not just one. One quick aside, for those of you with kids who are challenged in school, I would encourage you, and this is one of my favorite ideas, make your own report card up. So when your kids, because here's what happens with most of your kids, it's report card time. They come home and you say, hey, honey, did you get your report card? And most of your kids say, Mom, you know what? There are budget cuts this semester. They couldn't do report cards. Because your kids feel bad about their grades and They're not always good at school. It's not their thing. Book learning isn't. So I put proper and appropriate emphasis on the school report card. It's important, but not everything. But then I pull out my own report card as the parent and say, now, Jacob, here's what we value as a family. Here are the 5 traits that we know will cause you to be successful in life. And you come up with your own. Leadership. Many of your kids are fantastic leaders. Initiative. Many of your kids don't do well in school, quite honestly, because they just want your kids to follow directions all day and be very compliant. And some of your kids, the truth is, they're not good at that, but they're leaders and they have a lot of initiative. Good decision-making, self-control, compassion. Write down during the semester all the different ways your child exhibited those different character traits. So you get to balance out, yeah, school's kind of tough for you, and you did really well this semester, and you improved, and a couple things you need help with. But, man, in these 5 other traits, you're amazing. Problem solving, you can build a 5,000-piece Lego set without even reading the directions. That's a phenomenal skill. You're incredibly creative. So just balance it out. I like putting things in proper perspective so your kids don't grow up thinking that the only way I'm going to be successful in life is if I am great at school when I'm in 2nd grade, because some of your kids just aren't. Okay, homework time. Let's talk about some different tools to do homework in different ways. The brain science says that your kids' brains need to be stimulated when they do homework. The research says kids learn best when they are moving at times, when we are stimulating multiple senses. So I'm going to throw out some different things, different ideas, and you can try them with your kids. Exercise balls. Awesome. Do homework with your child sitting and bouncing on an exercise ball. It's helping with the movement. It helps with his core. Some of your kids will actually lay with their bellies on the ball and put their homework on the floor. Now, here's my warning for you. Some of you, that's not the way you did homework. Your way is to sit perfectly still in a chair at a table and knock out the homework. That's my wife. My wife is going back to school. She's getting her master's. That's the way she does her work, and that works for her. We call that table the table of death for many of our kids because when they sit still at a table, their brain shuts down. They're frustrated. Exercise balls, awesome. If any of you have those kids who lay off the homework, lay off the sofa upside down, try this afternoon. Go in with their math homework and challenge them and say, I bet you can't do your math homework upside down, and watch them lay off the sofa upside down doing their homework. It will drive you crazy, but they'll love it. Kids can review vocabulary words while they're jumping on a trampoline, while they're standing on their head, while you're playing catch or kicking a soccer ball back and forth. Quiz your kids because you're moving. The brain is stimulated. Music. Music is really important for your kids with ADHD for this reason. Their brains, if you picture, is a swirling, all these ideas swirling in their brains, and there's not a lot of order. Music has rhythm. Rhythm helps with processing because the rhythm in the music actually creates order in the brain. Many of your kids have said, Mom, can I listen to music while I'm doing my homework? And you said, no, it confuses me. Experiment with it. Let your kids listen to music while they're doing their homework. Chewing is very important. So instead of saying, hey, go have a snack and then do your homework, allow them to eat a snack while they're doing their homework. Some of your kids would do better homework while they're standing at the kitchen counter eating a snack, listening to music. Experiment with it. For little kids, make it fun. Put a little blanket over the kitchen table. Now you've made a fort. Forts are always cool. They can do their homework under the fort. They can give them a little flashlights. That makes homework fun. It makes it an adventure. They can eat the mac and cheese and chicken nuggets that fell off the floor, fell off the table from the night before, have a little snack under the table while they do their homework. You know what I'm saying. Make it fun. Change the dynamic. For older kids, my son does his homework while he's playing guitar, while he's listening to music. We often went out to a coffee shop or a Panera Bread type place because there's music there. They're out of the home, away from the distractions like video games, and they can do it in different ways. I am fine with telling your kids, hey, if you don't do your homework, you need to talk to your teacher about it. Use your best judgment on that, but sometimes with older kids, I like to turn it over to them. Hey, it's your homework. If you don't get it done, here are the consequences. You need to talk to your teacher about it. But I want kids to learn over time to own their homework, if that makes sense.
Lots of questions about sibling interactions. Kirk, I don't know, kids who behave negatively, harshly, meanly, not just to their parents, but to their siblings.
Okay.
Any thoughts on that?
You know what? I'm only going to address one part of that, which is this. And this will, just because there's so much on siblings, and I think this will get to a lot of issues with your kids. A lot of the kids that I work with, what I call our kids, they don't always fit in. They're different. They just are. Their brains don't work in the same ways. They're smarter than a lot of the other kids, but they have trouble connecting at school. They struggle with social skills. They struggle in class because they're really bright, but they're not always book learners. And they just develop this thing inside that says, I'm different. And everybody keeps trying to change me and make me into my brother and sister, because they're perfect and they're so well behaved and they get good grades all the time. Some of your kids just have this thing inside. They've internalized failure because they got kicked out of preschool. They couldn't sit still in circle time. It's just one endless thing after another. And when a child starts to internalize failure or feeling like I'm a bad kid, what will come out is your older kids will get a lot of anger and frustration. You'll get defiance. You'll get them calling you stupid. They'll get kids shutting down. You'll get kids who are mean to their siblings because what's happening is they're jealous of their siblings and they don't feel good about themselves. So in the absence of feeling good about themselves, they tear down someone else. So I would encourage you, above all things with your kids, build their confidence, not self-esteem, but confidence. Confidence comes from confidence, from competence, from doing things well. Just telling a child, oh, you're so great, you're really good, doesn't really do anything unless there's something substantive to hang on to. So you know how we talked about having a report card, your own report card to balance out maybe the school report card? I'd encourage you to do this with your kids of all ages, and this will help with internal motivation, helps with anger, frustration, all kinds of issues. Identify your child's gifts and passions, not what they're good at school, because some of your kids it's just tough, but what are your kids' gifts, talents, and passions? What do they love doing? When do they come alive? Like, are they good problem solvers? Are they good at playing chess and checkers? Are they good at playing video games? There's some certain skills with eye-hand coordination or problem solving. Your kids who are good at arguing are very good at that because they see patterns in life and they can see patterns in the argument. Are they very, very creative? Are they good with animals? Are your kids good with younger kids? Make that list. What are their gifts and talents and passions? Because that's going to be that is going to determine whether they're successful in life. People who are successful in life use their gifts, talents, and passions usually to help other people. Your kids, as defiant as they can be sometimes, have the biggest hearts of any kids on the planet. The kids with the biggest mouths have the biggest hearts, just not usually toward you. I'd encourage you to identify ways for your kids to use their gifts and passions outside the home. Ask teachers to give your kids jobs to do, not just academic chores, but bring in a Lego project that demonstrates a class lesson. Maybe they do draw posters. They do things at school that show off their particular gifts. You can do it at church and synagogue. Your older kids can have jobs and work for people. I love getting our kids accountable to other adults, doing things for other adults. And I guarantee you, of almost 100% of you listening, this is true. You ask your kids to do something, they don't listen. But when your kids go to someone else's house, that other adult always brings your child home and says, your daughter is such a delight to be with. And you say, seriously? Because at home, they're not that way. Get your kids using their gifts and passions outside the home, accountable to other adults. Because you've seen when your kids are put in adult situations, they're amazing. And it builds their confidence to know, Mom, you know what, when I volunteer down at the animal shelter or when I work with that veterinarian, the animals love me. They calm down when I walk in the room. I can get them calmed down better than the vet can. You know what, Mom or Dad, when I volunteer and I work in children's church Or I work at that after-school place, that daycare center with the little kids. The little kids love me. They'll sit on my lap, and I can read to them, and I can teach them how to do math. And when they're doing things that they love, it builds confidence because they get to feel it and see it for themselves. I've got a gift at this. I've got a gift at drawing and writing and building these things. So always balance out the negatives. Many of your kids go to therapy, they go to counseling sessions, and they often feel like, all you do is try to fix me, Mom and Dad. Stop trying to fix me. So you need to do those things, but balance that out with a healthy dose of focusing on their strengths and their gifts and passions. A child who feels confident, who has a vision for his future, will not feel the need to put down other people and to pick on his siblings because he is so busy, running his own little business and figuring out ways that he's going to be successful.
That's a great idea. We've got just a couple minutes left. Is there a topic that you would like to, last bit of advice you'd like to give our parents online here?
Yeah, I'll try two quick things. Many of your kids struggle with anxiety, and we didn't get to that. They don't want to do new things, go to like a new taekwondo place, so they won't do it. Here's quickly for anxiety. You can't talk kids out of anxiety. So I would encourage you to take your kids wherever they go. Go there a few days ahead of time. Talk to the taekwondo instructor and say, listen, taekwondo guy, listen, here's my son. He's going to be in your class next week. He gets kind of nervous about it, but he loves helping other people. Will you give him a job to do when he comes to your class every week? And I guarantee if you get teachers and school bus drivers and other adults or that taekwondo guy saying, listen, Jacob, love that you're going to be in my class next week. Hey, I need your help. Get here 5 minutes early. Every week when you come in, I want you to help me set up for class, put cones up, rearrange the mats, all that. Could you help me out with that? If you do that and you get people to give your kids jobs to do, it will help overcome that anxiety, because then instead of being afraid of all the new things that they're scared about at that new taekwondo place or that new school, they have a job to focus on, and it's very specific and creative. And the final thing I would leave you with is this, is lead your kids. Show and model your kids. When you get frustrated, what are you going to do next time you get frustrated? Start showing them how to calm down, and they'll follow you when you're doing that. If we can help you at all, we do a free newsletter. It's just at celebratecalm.com, and you'll find our Facebook page. But we'd love to help if you've got other questions. Attitude Magazine is a great resource. If we can be a resource, we'd love to help you out with that as well.
Kirk, I can't thank you enough. There are posts here saying things like, this is the coolest guy ever. Can he come back every week? So I think your advice has been really, really helpful to people. And everyone, I do urge you to check out Kirk's site, celebratecalm.com, and we will try to prompt him to come back for another webinar in the future. Thank you so much, Kirk, and everyone. Have a great day.
For more Attitude Podcast and information on living well with attention deficit, visit attitudemag.com. That's ADDITUDEMAG.com.